Welcome back. You're watching Wake Up WA. Well, how hard do you find it to say no? For some people, it can be very easy, but for others, it can be extremely difficult. Not just taking a piece of chocolate cake or saying no to a cup of coffee, but you know, when people really put you on the spot and ask for your help, perhaps driving you somewhere or really going out of your way to help you, for some people it can be extremely difficult. Joining us now, we have Anna Zammit from Excel to help just define and explain a little bit more about why people have such difficulty with saying no. So Anna, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, guys.
So why do people find it so hard to say no?
Well, I think it's because we are so concerned about what other people think. So we feel compelled that we've got to do things that sometimes we don't want to do. An interesting one, I suppose, is, you know, for people to be roped into committees that they don't really want to be in, and they feel that they've got to put their hand up because they think that nobody else will do it.
And even once you're on some of the committees that I've been on, I'd say you're on it and then you feel like you have to keep helping out because there's almost no one else. So you've gotten into the committee saying, I'll do a little bit, and then you end up being roped into a lot more.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is that, you know, what is the cost of that, of doing something that you don't really want to be doing? You know, there's a cost to that, and the cost is how you feel about now doing something that you don't really want to do but felt compelled to do.
So where's the line? I mean, obviously not everybody wants to go to work and not everybody wants to work their hardest at times. So, so obviously there's a line of discipline. How do you know when you reach this or not?
Well, I think for people it's very difficult to know if they've actually reached that point because it's something that they've always done. I've been working with a young lady of late who is starting her own business, and she has this tendency of not being able to say no. And of course in business that can be of real concern. And I did this exercise with her one day, which was just, she's never forgotten it. You know, she would just take everything anybody ever asked her to do. She would just do it and do it and do it. And so I started to pick things up around the room and I started to hand them to her. And eventually I took my shoe off and I gave it to her and she took it. And when we talked about it, and she looked at this shoe and she said, well, now I get it. I will just take anything. I will just do anything because somebody else asks me to. I think it's the realisation that you actually can choose and it's okay to say no.
So if you there's probably a lot of viewers out there who perhaps not really sure, how do they know that they might be a case for someone who doesn't know how to say no, or maybe a case for someone who's overly helpful? What are some of the indicators they could be looking for in themselves?
Well, they will know because the way they feel about the fact that they are doing more. They feel that what you're looking for is a fair exchange, if you like. You want a fairness. And when you don't get that fairness or a win-win, you do feel an emotional cost. You feel like you're being used. You feel like your needs aren't being met. You know, everybody else's are being met, but yours aren't. That's how you know.
So if you're perhaps saying yes quite a bit and then having these lagging feelings, that's the indicator to you.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. And you know, I mean, if you're trying to do this by yourself, sometimes it's very difficult. You don't feel good about yourself because of the fact that you're saying, well, no, I'm not doing this. I've had enough, and that can be quite a challenge for some as well.
Anna, does this affect any certain demographics, or is this something that's globally applicable to all of us?
It's not applicable to certainly all, but there's no demographic that you can say, you know, this is only for women or this is only for men or a certain age group, because the work that I do, I actually see it right across the board. You know, where you go to people in management, for example, that have that tendency, that can actually stop their development as well, because, you know, they're a doormat for everybody. So
other than telling them to just accept the fact that you can say no, what are some of the steps that you go through to help these people change their ways?
Well, it depends on the person that you're working with, but some of the things that you would do is help them to understand why they can't say no, and that quite often is about how they feel and how they think about things. So for them it's quite a personal thing to understand, you know, what it is that compels them to feel that they've got to do all these things when they don't want to. A lot of it is, you know, a willingness or a wantingness to be liked, to not let people down, and so it could be over responsibility, it can be a number of things. So working with people, it really depends on what it is and discovering for themselves why they have this tendency to not be able to say no.
And are there any particular questions that we can perhaps self-coach ourselves and ask ourselves on to say, well, why am I always saying yes?
Yeah.
Are there any sort of such questions that we can ask ourselves?
Yes, questions like, well, what if I do this? How am I going to feel about it? If I do this, is this really what I want to do? At the end of this, am I going to get something out of this that I want to get out of? And it's not about always saying no, because sometimes you do want to do things, but you're doing them for the right reasons. And I think that's the key here, is that you're doing them because you want to do them, rather than because you feel compelled to. So there's nothing wrong with sitting on a committee if that's what you really want to do, because you can contribute to that committee and make a difference. It's when you're sitting on a committee or anything else that you're doing that you're doing things, but at the end you become a little bit resentful because you feel that you're not being valued.
And earlier you mentioned that fair exchange is one of the things that we could look at for the things that we say yes to. Fair exchange, I think, can immediately pop into our mind that that's sort of like a cash for reward sort of thing, but I think fair exchange could be lots of different currencies, so to speak, and we can get paid in many different ways or rewarded in many different ways. What are some of the other ways that people feel that they've got fair exchange?
Well, when I talk about fair exchange, I don't talk about money. I talk about a fair exchange in how you feel and emotions. So, if we were transacting, and again here I'm not talking about monetary, if we're having a conversation or a business dealing or anything, we want something that's fair, that we're both going to get something out of that emotionally, where I'm going to come away from that thinking, gee, I like doing that, I'm glad I did that, I feel good about that.
Both parties can then be happy.
Correct. And that's all we're looking for, and that's the fair, is that it's a fair exchange, that everybody comes out of feeling quite good about what they've done.
Well, you make it sound like it's quite easy to change if that is one of your habits, not being able to say no. Thank you very much for coming in this morning, Anna.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go back to the